PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. And on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, we are going to be discussing the upcoming 2024 NHL draft here in Las Vegas. And more importantly, because we're at a certain point in the season, it is going to be doing similar to what we did last year with the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. We are going to be discussing and breaking down which team will win the Macklin Celebrini sweepstakes. Who is going to be the team that gets the number one overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft? We have 4 teams that we're going to be mentioning here on this show. So it's going to be a fun episode, kind of talking about the upcoming draft and what team should be the number one pick in the NHL draft at this moment in time. Now, obviously, there's still some time in the regular season. We all know that. But what we are going to do is actually break down the 4 worst teams in the NHL today and look closely at what we see with these 4 teams and if they have a realistic shot of getting the number one overall pick. Then, afterwards, we're going to also kind of look at it and say, okay, how would this player impact this team? All right, what would the outlook of this team be if they get the number one overall pick? And when would it be an impact? Where would the impact be on the organization? We're going to break all of that down here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. Go to the website, by the way. Check out all the amazing content, including Vegas Hockey Hub. We have about a dozen shows on the network. Go to Vegas Hockey Hub. We are on all social media platforms at Vegas Hockey Hub. And if you want to follow your host, I'm on social media as well at Ian J. Kelly. So before we get to the top 4, okay, before we get to the 4 worst teams in hockey at this moment in time, I want to do an honorable mention because I'm not going to sit here and say that it's a possibility for this team to get the number one overall pick, but because of how bad they have been, they are an honorable mention. The Ottawa Senators need to be on here, and there's a reason why. Because the Ottawa Senators, frankly, over the last 5 or 6 years, have just been dumping assets. But what Ottawa has also been trying to accomplish is get these young guys into the organization. Find a way to accumulate all of these draft picks, get young guys, get a Tim Stützle, get a Brady Tkachuk, get Josh Norris, get all of these young guys via free, trades or via the draft, and help Ottawa get better. And Ottawa gained the number one overall pick. Now, at this moment in time, they have the 5th best odds of getting the 2024 NHL draft. In fact, there's an odds calculator that you can look at. That's actually what we're using for our information here. And Ottawa is ranked 5th in that draft lottery system the NHL uses today. Now, how would this impact the Ottawa Senators getting the number one overall pick? Well, you really have to sit there and analyze what the roster makeup is for the Ottawa Senators. Let's actually break this down from a logical perspective. Now, keep this in mind, okay? At this moment in time, the Ottawa Senators, this is an organization who, when you actually study this team, and you actually break down the organization itself. Now, I'm not going to focus on the prospects that are not in the NHL yet. Those are like magic beans. It's really hard to actually look at that organization and really see what it's going to look like moving forward. But what we can do here on Vegas Hockey Hub is we are going to examine the roster of the Ottawa Senators, because if you get the first overall pick, and yes, I did mention earlier in the show that yes, there is a sweepstakes and Macklin Celebrini, he is the projected first overall pick, but he's not the only player that could end up being that guy in the NHL draft. There's some more talent that kind of, between 1 to 5 that could help your organization out. But let's get back to the Ottawa Senators very quickly. This is an organization who their most recent game, they actually did pretty well. They actually beat a team that is on this list, and that is the Columbus Blue Jackets. But the Ottawa Senators, they are last in the Atlantic. They have been really struggling as of late. And when you break down this organization, this is a team that has kind of been on the back burner. They're kind of on the back end here. And the roster makeup, you have Thomas Chabot, Eric Brandstrom, they acquired from the Vegas Golden Knights in the Mark Stone trade, kind of getting up there in age, but he's still there. Obviously, you have Ridley Gregg, who is a young up-and-coming prospect that really has joined the organization for them. But overall, for the Ottawa Senators, they have a bunch of veterans on this team too, and I have no doubt in my mind that we are going to see them offload these veteran contracts. And we're going to see the Ottawa Senators find a way to trade these guys who are in their late 20s, early 30s, and get a bunch of assets back. I will not be shocked if in a little bit we're going to see that happening. But who do you necessarily keep? Because Tim Stützle and Brady Tkachuk are probably your 1-2, right? Shane Pinto, I like him. Josh Norris, I like him as well. But those are probably your 2A, 2B situation. So when I see the Ottawa Senators and I really look at what they have done in terms of an organization, I sit there and say, your goaltending's a little bit suspect. Anton Forsberg, he's doing the best he can, but I don't think that he is a solidified number one. Your defense is a little bit shaky outside of Thomas Chabot. So the Ottawa Senators have a lot to play here, but I include them as an honorable mention because they have the 5th best odds at this moment in time. But it will be curious to see how the Ottawa Senators do. And if they do get the number 1 pick, it would help boost their top 6 and really elevate their top 6 into one of the best up-and-coming teams in the NHL. They just need to really work on that defense and maybe get a goaltender in the offseason. I mean, hey, look, regardless of what happens in the future, okay, we know what's coming down the road. We know what's about to happen soon. Do not be shocked if Ottawa gets used as a chip or they get used as a third team in a trade. Do not be shocked if the Ottawa Senators make a bunch of trades in the upcoming future because this is an organization that has a lot of veteran contracts at this time, and I will not be surprised if they offload those contracts and try to get rid of them in the upcoming weeks. So this is also, talking about what team will get the number 1 overall pick in the NHL Draft 2024, which will be held in Las Vegas. And I did want to mention to everybody that your host, Ian Rakelli, Vegas Hockey Hub, I will be at the 2024 NHL Draft at the Sphere in Las Vegas. So if you go to our social medias at Vegas Hockey Hub, I will be uploading and posting content from the NHL Draft when it does happen. So, a few months from now, that's going to be a real fun experience. But yeah, so talking about the 2024 NHL Draft. Now, the next team that we're going to mention have the 4th best odds of getting the first overall pick in the NHL Draft. And this is an organization who over the last 4 seasons, they have undergone a huge transformation. They have done a lot of big changes when it comes to this organization. Now, the Columbus Blue Jackets, we all know about the Mike Babcock situation in the preseason and how that went terribly wrong for them. And considering that their coach might be just a bridge coach, I would not be surprised if the Columbus Blue Jackets do make a change by the time they get to the NHL Draft when that time finally comes. But realistically, when it comes to the Columbus Blue Jackets, what do they necessarily have at this moment in time? What can they really sit here and say, we have so-and-so to help out this team? Now, Johnny Gaudreau signed there for whatever reason, and he has fallen off a cliff performance-wise. He has just been awful as a Columbus Blue Jacket, but since he was a former star in Calgary, he is still going to be a part of that organization. You do have veterans on this team. You have Eric Branson, who has been around probably half the league by now, but he is a veteran that you can use as a chip. They also have some defensemen that they've tried to use and try to use correctly, like you have Zach Werenski, you have Damian Severson. There is some defensemen that do have some upside in Columbus, so the defense would probably be the best in that situation. The goaltending, I mean, Elvis, cool name and all, but I don't think that he is a solid number one either. But where the offense lies in Columbus is a huge problem. Because, yes, you do have Boone Jenner, you have Kent Johnson, you have Cole Slinger. There is some young guys on their forward lines. And where Macklin Celebrini could come into play and how impactful he would be in Columbus would be adding another star to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Because this is an organization that, let's just be brutally honest, when's the last time they had a superstar on Columbus's team? I'm not going to go back towards the Rick Nash era. All right, obviously, Rick Nash was about a decade ago. Hasn't been that far. But I will say that when it comes to the Columbus Blue Jackets, an organization that really has been lost since they had the Artemi Panarin and Matt Duchene situation. Everybody remembers back in 2018, 2019, Columbus Blue Jackets went all in to get into the playoffs, and then they beat the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round. Now, everyone who knows hockey knows what happened afterwards. Matt Duchene, he goes and plays for the Nashville Predators. Artemi Panarin signs the mega deal to go to the New York Rangers. But the Columbus Blue Jackets have not had a superstar since Panarin, since Duchene. And, I think that having somebody that they draft like a Rick Nash would be super impactful for the Columbus Blue Jackets. So despite them having the fourth best odds to get the number one overall pick, it is plausible for them to get that deal. And it really would benefit them. How? Because they would have a superstar. They would have a number one pick that came to Columbus. It would help this team in the future become better and better and better. Now, the next team, and this is actually going to be all on the West Coast now. Ironically enough, the three best teams with the best odds in the NHL draft are all in the Western Conference. Columbus out there in the Eastern Conference. Ottawa Senators, who was our honorable mention, they are on the East Coast. But you have the last three teams all in the Western Conference, two of them in the Pacific, and then one in the Central. Now, the team with the third best odds of getting the number one overall pick at the 2024 NHL draft here in Las Vegas. This is an organization that has so much young talent already that getting a number one overall pick and adding to that future would just be the extra cherry on top. Getting a number one overall pick for this organization would actually help them kind of build stability and maybe get some credibility into becoming a playoff team 1 or 2 years down the road. I like the roster makeup. The general manager has done a solid job since he's taken over with that team. And I'm talking about the Anaheim Ducks. By the way, bring back this logo, please. The new one sucks. There's no nice way to put it. The new logo sucks. Bring this one back. But the Anaheim Ducks, who have the third best odds right now of getting the number one overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft. Now, this is an organization who just got shut out recently. I mean, their most recent matchup, they got shut out. It was not a pretty sight. But the Anaheim Ducks, their goaltending, you have a young, up-and-coming goaltender in Lucas Dostal. All right? He is a future stud in net for Anaheim. So unlike Columbus, unlike Ottawa, and unlike the two teams that are going to be after Anaheim, they have a future goaltender that they can count on moving forward. They're actually one of the only teams on this list that has a goaltender who they can count on going forward. This is also the same organization who, man, so much young talent on this team. You have Leo Carlson, who you drafted last year. You also have, for example, Mason McTavish, who's on this team. Really solid guy. You also have all of this young talent that is in the AHL that are prospects currently that are projected to make a splash eventually with Anaheim. So the young talent is on the rise. A goaltender who's on the rise. Your defense is led by established veteran and longtime Anaheim Duck, Cam Fowler. You also have some good veteran defensemen on that organization. You do have, Rako Gudas, who is a kind of a chippy guy on defense for sure. But this organization, you have veterans who are part of the team. You have young guys who are about to come in and make a statement. And what I can appreciate about the Anaheim Ducks is that unlike the two teams I mentioned prior and the two teams I'm about to mention afterwards, this is a team where if you get the number 1 overall pick, you could be a playoff team next year. If you are an organization who gets the number 1 overall pick and you draft someone like Macklin Celebrini, the Anaheim Ducks could realistically, with all of that established talent, maybe make a change in terms of coaching, but I'm not going to go that far. This is an Anaheim Ducks team that has been doing it right the last 3 seasons. They've been building things up correctly over time. And regardless if you're playing at the pond, the Arrowhead Pond back in the day, this is an Anaheim Ducks team that has the biggest upside to getting the number 1 overall pick. How great would it be for Anaheim to get a number 1 pick that would elevate their squad, greatly improve the top 6, and make that youth movement part of their core moving forward? Now, when do I see the Anaheim Ducks doing this? I can see this by next year, 2 years from now, being a playoff team. But it really depends on who they draft or what their pick is in the 2024 NHL draft. Now, just for comparison, just for observation, let's say that the top 5 picks are exactly in this order, okay? They're not going to. They rarely have ever been on that situation. But let's just say, for argument's sake, okay? Let's just say that when it comes to the 2024 NHL draft, you stay with this pick and you end up having the 3rd overall pick. Well, you could end up getting somebody like Cole Iserman out there with Boston University playing alongside with Macklin Celebrini. Sam Dickinson from London from the Ontario Hockey League, but he is a defenseman, so maybe the Anaheim Ducks don't go that route. But when you've really studied and broke down what the draft is going to be this upcoming season, I mean, you have the forward from Spokane, Catton from Spokane. He's a guy who maybe has some potential there. There is so much talent that's going to be part of this roster, kind of part of the way it's built right now. But the Ottawa Senators, they have the 5th pick. Columbus having the 4th pick, Anaheim having the 3rd pick in terms of odds right now in the NHL draft. It's just a situation where when you really study and break down everything that we're talking about, it just reminds me that this is an organization where if you stay with the 3rd overall pick, which is probably not going to happen, but let's just say for argument's sake they do, them getting maybe the guy from Russia, Ivan Demidov. This is a guy from Russia playing in the MHL. Maybe if they get him with a top 5 pick, that's still a forward. I feel like it may be a little bit of a consolation prize compared to Macklin Celebrini. But the Anaheim Ducks, 3rd best odds of getting the number 1 overall pick. And I think that actually would work well for them. So as we are talking about this here on Vegas Hockey Hub, I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. And the 2nd odds and the worst team in the Pacific Division. Now, this is somebody where I think Berkeley Catton could actually play and would probably be projected to go, and that would be this organization right here. Now, yes, the Vegas Golden Knights, San Jose Sharks have had a rivalry forever, but I'm going to leave that to the side. How plausible is it for San Jose to get the number 1 overall pick? Well, considering the odds right now, considering how the odds are really favoring San Jose and the one team I'm going to talk about that's kind of below them right now, it does make a lot of sense for San Jose to get the number 1 overall pick. Now, I'm not going to go by market size because obviously a team beneath them is one of the biggest markets in the NHL. But how fascinating it would be for San Jose to really go and get the number 1 overall pick, considering how the last 5 years have been. You have sold off essentially every asset you have outside of 1 or 2 guys you pretty much have that's left from the last time you were relevant. You got rid of Joe Pavelski. You got rid of Joe Thornton. You got rid of Erik Karlsson, Brett Burns, everyone who you could think of from the San Jose Sharks team back in the mid-teens. This is a San Jose Sharks team that no longer resembles that. So when it comes to the San Jose Sharks, I would say that either them or the team we're going to mention later that have the best odds of getting the number 1 overall pick, they have a plausible reason to kind of flip and become the number 1 overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft. And the only negative I would have with this is I'd feel bad for Celebrini. Because if you go to San Jose, what talent do they have currently? Like, this is really no bashing or anything like that. I'm just being dead serious. What is the situation there? That when it comes to the NHL and when it comes to San Jose Sharks, what do they necessarily have in terms of the talent pool? What is their motivation in terms of what talent you would be building around him? It essentially would be Celebrini, and that is it. I mean, everybody remember, this is a San Jose Sharks team who just got shut out by the Winnipeg Jets recently. I mean, this is a San Jose Sharks team that gives up goals after goals after goals. And really, from a future perspective, what do you have in terms of future? William Eklund? Maybe. Zetterlund? Like, there really isn't a lot of future talent in San Jose. They're going to spend the next 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, building this team. So getting the number one overall pick seems nice in theory, but in reality, the San Jose Sharks would be wasting a future talent if they do get the number 1 overall pick. But getting, Barclay Catton from the Spokane out there in the Western Hockey League, I will point out that would not be a consolation prize. He is still a very talented player out there in Spokane. But when it comes to Celebrini, he is the clear number 1 right now. But if you did get number 2, getting Catton would be someone that you could actually say would be a good move for them moving forward. And when it comes to the number 1 team, the team that has the best odds of getting the number 1 overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft, this would be back-to-back years, okay? This would be getting the number 1 overall pick in one of the biggest markets in the NHL. And of course, I am talking about the team that got Connor Bedard last year, and that is the Chicago Blackhawks. This is a Chicago Blackhawks organization who they know what they're doing. They remember the Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane era. Okay, this is a Chicago Blackhawks team that knows how to build for the future. And yeah, they lost to Vancouver recently. We are all aware of that. It happens. But for Chicago, this is an organization that if you have Connor Bedard, and you do, he is going to be your future backbone. And then you get Celebrini to pair him alongside and have him be a top 6 forward on the Chicago Blackhawks. That would make them a lot better. You also have to remember, this is a team that does have some good talent alongside it. You'd also have Seth Jones on the defense. Yes, he is massively overpaid, but he still is a good defenseman on some areas. You have Lucas Reichel, who is a young up-and-coming guy. You also have Philip Kurashev. You have Kevin Korchinski. This is a Chicago Blackhawks team that does have some future assets, and they would be able to build around Macklin Celebrini and Connor Bedard with that Chicago Blackhawks team. Now, the goaltending is awful. All right, Peter Mrazek should not be your number 1 guy. Okay, so they really will have to go and get a young goaltender, either free agency or they have to make a trade, go out and get one, whatever. But the Chicago Blackhawks getting the number 1 overall pick, it does make sense how the NHL would want to do this again, have back-to-back years, Chicago Blackhawks getting the number 1 overall pick. It makes a lot of sense. And from a market perspective, this is the biggest market out of the 5 that I've mentioned. Okay, Anaheim would probably be a close second because that's kind of around the Los Angeles, LA market. But Chicago is Chicago. The Chicago Blackhawks are an original 6 team. Those are an organization the NHL would love to promote. The NHL would want to have in prime time. The NHL would want to have in marquee games every single year. I mean, after all, the Winter Classic next year is going to be the Blues versus Blackhawks, and they're going to be playing, I think, at Wrigley Field once again. So Chicago Blackhawks makes a whole lot of sense in this situation. And I would say that when it comes to the odds, and now this is my opinion. All right, this is your host, Ian Rakelly's opinion. I see the draft lottery ended up going like this. I think the Anaheim Ducks get the number 1 overall pick. They move up from 3 to 1. The Blackhawks would move down to 2. The Columbus Blue Jackets would move up to 3, and San Jose would go to 4. Now, I could see a team squeaking in to top 5, maybe Montreal, considering, once again, the dynasty and the fact that they are one of the most prestigious organizations in the NHL. Maybe they would creep into the top 5. I also know that from what we've seen in terms of the draft odds, I know that the Arizona Coyotes, they're trying to make kind of a push there. If they lose enough games, they'll kind of fall a little bit. But, looking at the draft order, this is an organization, and these 5 organizations that I mentioned all have plausible explanations for getting the number 1 overall pick. And before we end the show, I do want to mention the possibility of someone doing a New York Rangers a couple of years ago, and that is having a lower odds but getting the number 1 overall pick. Now, teams that we're talking about in this situation here, obviously, I could be mentioning, for example, the Buffalo Sabres. The Buffalo Sabres do not have that high of an odds right now, but when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres, if they move up from like 7 to 1, or maybe the Montreal Canadiens move up from around 6 to 1, that's a possibility there. Also have to keep in mind that maybe a team that's going to miss the playoffs, like Minnesota, like Seattle, there's a possibility of them kind of going from, where the 9, 10, 11 area is and jumping up and getting to the number 1 overall pick. Now, the odds are extremely low, but we have seen it in the past. Ever since the draft lottery and ever since everything that has happened as of late, we have seen that there are teams that kind of jump up from their spot originally into the NHL draft lottery, so it is plausible. So once again, what team will get the number 1 overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft? Now, the odds-on favorite would be the Chicago Blackhawks because of the big market that they have. In terms of record, the San Jose Sharks do make a lot of sense. They have been one of the most terrible teams in the NHL, and they do need a star out there in San Jose. But your host pick to get the number 1 overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft being held here in Las Vegas would be the Anaheim Ducks. So I want to pass this over to you. What team do you see getting the number 1 overall pick? What organization could you see the organization going up, getting to the podium, and selecting the number 1 overall pick, and going to get someone like a Macklin Celebrini, going out and getting a Berkeley Catton, or maybe just going out and getting the guy from Russia in Ivan Demidov? So, this is Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rakelly. And until next time, continue watching hockey, go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go.